You're invited to enter the surreal world of Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Yep, on this video, we're going to explore the topic of Alice in Wonderland syndrome and its connection to autism. Let's go. Welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I'm Orion Kelly, that autistic guy. I'm all about helping you raise your level of understanding, acceptance, and appreciation of the autistic community. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in being a part of, well, I reckon you should join this most amazing YouTube community. And go and check out my brand new YouTube channel dedicated to nothing but video podcasts, the Orion Kelly podcast channel. It's live and ready and going and stuff. Let's take a journey into the surreal world of Alice in Wonderland syndrome and its connection to autism. But first, I guess we better talk about what is Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Keep in mind, I'm an autistic guy using my lived experiences to have general discussions about topics that relate to autism. This isn't medical advice. It's not a lecture. I'm not a textbook. We're just having a general discussion. So, with that said, Alice in Wonderland syndrome, also known as Todd's syndrome, is a neurological condition that can affect perception and cause people to experience visual and auditory hallucinations. Distorted body image, that's a big one for me, and critically other symptoms that can be like those experienced by autistic people. Clearly, Alice in Wonderland syndrome is named after the famous Lewis Carroll novel, Alice in Wonderland. And I guess in general terms, because those with the condition can have experiences similar to those strange, surreal experiences of the characters from the book. Now, the symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome can vary greatly from person to person. However, they typically include changes to the size and shape of objects, difficulties with time perception, and visual and auditory hallucinations. So what is the relationship between Alice in Wonderland syndrome and autism? Although they're two distinct conditions, they can sometimes occur together. In fact, autistic people may be more susceptible to experiencing symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome. And I'm talking about symptoms including sensory overload and perceptual difficulties. And just an added little tidbit here, take it or leave it, grain of salt. Some researchers believe the symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome may actually be related to migraine headaches, which can, not always, but can be more common with autistic people. It's really important to note though that not all autistic people will experience Alice in Wonderland syndrome. And additionally, not all people who experience Alice in Wonderland syndrome will be autistic. However, I reckon understanding the relationship between the two conditions has to help individuals experiencing it or their family, friends, partners, carers better understand and therefore navigate the challenges that come with it. Let me give you some basic practical examples of how autistic people may experience Alice in Wonderland syndrome. First example, micropsia. Micropsia, how do you say it? It doesn't really matter. In essence, it's when we experience objects appearing smaller than they actually are, which can cause confusion and disorientation. Another example, macropsia, or macropsia. Micro, you get what I'm saying. As opposed to the first example, this is when we experience objects appearing larger than they actually are, which can lead to sensory overload and increased anxiety. The next example is polopsia. This is when objects appear to be closer or further or farther away than they actually are. Polopsia can make it really difficult for us to navigate our surroundings, which is probably something most autistic people can relate to. I can feel this example, I'm telling you. A distorted perception of time. Does time ever seem to slow down or speed up for you? And does that then make it hard for you to keep up with your daily routines, daily life, daily tasks? The next example is an increased sensitivity to sound and light. So basically, bright lights or loud noises can actually exacerbate symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome, which obviously causes additional stress, additional anxiety. I've experienced this next example my whole life. It's an altered perception of body image. In other words, we experience changes to the perception of our own body's size and shape. Now, this is not a good thing to experience, right? What does that lead to? Discomfort, anxiety, self-loathing. Many other much more dangerous conditions can come from this altered perception of your body size, your body shape, your body image. Another example of how an autistic person can experience Alice in Wonderland syndrome is distorted thinking. So Alice in Wonderland syndrome may cause us to experience distorted thinking and confusion, which clearly leads to an overall decline in our well-being. Next example, difficulty with social interactions. So all the distorted perception characteristics of Alice in Wonderland syndrome can make it really difficult to engage in social interactions. Just go back through the examples we've talked about already and see how each and every one has an impact on your experience with not only the world, but other people in that world, whatever world you're living in. Another example on how autistic people can experience Alice in Wonderland syndrome is increased sensitivity to touch. Now, this increased sensitivity to touch obviously impacts our daily life and interactions, but it also manifests in a lack of tolerance for certain textures, touches, or feels that you may not usually have a problem with. Final example, and a big one, an altered perception of space. In basic terms, space seems distorted. So the space around you, your surroundings, seem distorted. That's going to make it pretty hard to navigate that space, to maintain a sense of stability, security, ease in your surroundings. Listen up, my friend, because here are some key strategies that can help autistic people cope with the symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome. First up, develop coping strategies. And I mean develop coping strategies that are tailored and that actually work for you. Some examples you could consider would be things like deep breathing, meditation, grounding techniques. Because remember, the trigger for symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome, among other things, can be when you are dysregulated. Another strategy is keep a diary. And I'm talking about a diary of your symptoms, of your triggers, and how they impact your daily life. This is useful because it helps you identify the patterns and therefore navigate the challenges. Next strategy, maintain a regular sleep schedule. The symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome can actually be exacerbated by poor sleep, by sleep deprivation, or irregular sleeping patterns. Developing and sticking to a consistent sleep schedule can really help. Another example is managing your stress. We well know stress can trigger symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Developing stress management techniques, like what we've talked about, meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises, grounding techniques can be really helpful. Here's a helpful strategy, and might seem a little bit obvious though. It's avoid known triggers. Identify and avoid the known triggers of the symptoms you're experiencing. And try to be really holistic with this approach. It can include foods. Check your diet, what you're eating, what you're drinking. What activities have you been up to recently? How's your sleep? How's your stress? Look at all the possible known triggers. Next example is use sensory integration techniques. It sounds fancy, but really what it means is just use things that help you with sensory regulation. Weighted blankets might be your thing. A deep pressure massage, that may help. Whatever forms of sensory regulation helps you maintain peace. Another strategy is use visual aids. Calendars, checklists, schedules can help people experiencing Alice in Wonderland syndrome better manage their time and activities. And the final key strategy for autistic people to cope with the symptoms of Alice in Wonderland syndrome is seek the support of others. This might mean finding and joining support groups, or this might mean just simply reaching out to friends and family, your partner, whoever. Now that was a journey, my friends. That was a journey. I appreciate you being a part of that amazing and quite surreal journey. Hey, do you have a topic idea? I'd love to hear it. If you think you've got an idea that you'd like me to talk about in an upcoming video, let's see it in the comments below. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Until my next video, thanks for watching. We'll talk soon.